we have three panelists. We have Mikko Salo, come over here, from Faktabaari, Finland, Finnish fact-checking site. Istupaatpa sinne. Mä istun tähän reunaan. And we have Jussi Toivanen, who is the leading communication specialist from the Finnish Prime Minister's Office. And we have Naja Bentzen, who's a researcher at the European Parliamentary Research Services. I would first like to ask each and every one of you to describe your work, because I'm not sure everyone here is familiar with everything you do. Maybe let's start with you, Naja. What is the job of a researcher at European Parliamentary Research Services?
My job, do I need to use the...
Yeah, you do.
Hello everyone, and welcome, and thank you for coming, and thank you very much for inviting me. My job is researching disinformation related issues, and also certain countries such as Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova and other Eastern Partnership countries, plus the Arctic. What I do is I respond to questions from our members. I work in the members' research service, so they can send us questions and we then respond to them in the form of either tailored analysis, written briefings, or we can also do in-person briefings where we come to their offices, for example, to explain certain topics. We publish some of our work, and but the most part of what we do is not published, so it's confidential, and we don't disclose the questions or who has asked the questions.
Thank you. And what about you, Jussi? What do you do at the Prime Minister's Office? Is it confidential?
Not at all. Yeah, the work we are doing is very open and transparent. That's the way we need to do it. So my main duty is to coordinate our ministry's activities to counter hostile information activities targeted at Finland. For example, when we are talking about elections, that was one of our key tasks during the past year, how to protect our electoral system and how to support our democracy. But most of the days I'm traveling around, training civil servants, meeting foreign colleagues and coordinating our activities. So during the past couple of years, me and my colleagues, we have trained to over more than 10,000 civil servants, brief journalists. We have given lectures and we have been training and so forth. So it's kind of ongoing work for us to raise the awareness of the people and also be prepared.
And what about you, Mikko? What is Faktabaari?
Okay, Faktabaari is a Finnish fact-checking. Is this okay? Hello? Is better? So Faktabaari is a Finnish fact-checking service established 2014. We started with the European elections at those days. It has though evolved towards the basically kind of center where it brings together people who are really worried about the disinformation problems and the information disorders. And we are mostly nowadays, in between the elections that we have covered, all of them, 6 of, we are mostly focused on kind of internet literacy. And what we try to do now is that we try to reveal a little bit what's the world we are living in, and it's a very complex situation actually, and we might probably go there a little bit afterwards. I have also a background in civil service for about 15 years in EU level. I live in Brussels and I have had a chance to contribute, for example, with Ricardo to the EU approach that we might discuss as well. Oh, sorry, yeah. Oh, I hope you heard, yeah, okay, sorry.
So let's go into elections then and election meddling. Jussi, you mentioned how you had been working before we had parliamentary elections and then of course the EU Parliament elections recently in Finland. And you gave quite a lot of interviews for the media about how Finland was preparing for possible disinformation campaigns and election meddling. Tell us a little little about that, because I understand it was like an unprecedented level of preparation.
Yeah, I could talk for hours about this issue. One of the best feedbacks I have received that it's an unbelievable guy that he can speak same time when he's inhaling and exhaling. So what we did, first of all, we gathered around the same table different actors, different authorities who are involved in organizing the elections. And then the first thing was to strengthen our cooperation. In Finland, we have the old concept called comprehensive security approach. We've been developing since the Second World War. So we didn't invent anything new. Instead, that we looked at our strengths and also where are the weaknesses, and of course we improved them. But the cooperation was the first thing, and the second thing that we needed, important to raise the awareness of the people and also civil servants and also political parties, and then to establish connections with the social media companies. That was one of our tasks. And as part of the election preparedness activities, we had our first communications campaign targeted to wider public. The headline of the campaign was, or the name of the campaign was, that Finland has the best elections in the world. Why is that? Because we are so humble nation. We wanted to remember. The reason was that we wanted to remind people that we've been running over 110 years successfully elections, even in difficult circumstances, so that people can trust on our elections. Our election system is very robust. We still have the paper, pencil and the voting booth, and that's impossible to hack, because we saw that the biggest threat was that someone tries to cast a shadow over our elections, so that people would trust the election result or the election system, that they start thinking about there is something weird in our system. We wanted to remind people that our election system is very safe. And we also did a lot of cooperation, especially with our Swedish colleagues. We changed the information and learned a lot what they did. And we published a handbook on how to counter hostile information activities. And there was a lot of things we did: training, briefing, raising awareness, and also strengthening our cooperation.
In Sweden especially, they had elections a few months before we did. And there especially, there was a lot of disinformation about election fraud, alleged election fraud. Was that something that you observed in Finland? Was that sort of thing spread around social media?
There were a few tweets, so it was very, very minor, not in that extent what was in Sweden, for example. But that was one possibility we thought beforehand that could happen also in Finland. For example, during the election day, when the election vote counting is going on, then just a DOS attack shuts down the Ministry of Justice election result site, and then the stories would just start appearing and spreading. But that didn't happen. But that was one of the scenarios we prepared. We also put a tinfoil hat on our heads and thought other possibilities. That what would I do if I would try to harm our election system? That was to keep one of the quick questions we asked from ourselves.
And did any of those scenarios come true?
No. Before the election there was one DOS attack, but the election day was very calm. So we were prepared. And also it's good to remember that a couple of years ago we had presidential elections and we were already prepared at that time. So this is kind of ongoing activity. It's not only about elections, but we are all the time looking a little bit what's happening tomorrow and the day after that, and thinking in advance that what could affect on us.
So nothing happened?
Nothing happened, yeah.
So does that mean that malicious actors are not interested in meddling with our elections?
No, I think what we did, that we didn't look in the beginning we described that we are not looking only after the state actors, because the lessons we learned from the Swedish elections and from the Baltic elections, that individuals, even domestic ones, could become actors. And that's why we adopted kind of a 360-degree approach, so that we were not looking after there is Russia behind every single tweet. Instead, that we wanted to know and learn about the methods disinformation is spread around in our society. And also when we discuss with the candidates, so for example, online harassing, targeting, that was a kind of new phenomenon. Maybe it's been earlier, but this time it became more obvious. The social media tools they are free for everyone. Yeah.
There was research by the Oxford Internet Institute after the Swedish election, and actually this research, it was about tweets, so only about Twitter, but which is not the whole picture of social media, as we know. But this research found that vast majority of the disinformation spread on Swedish Twitter just before the election was homegrown. So the Russian disinformation was minuscule in comparison. Is that something that maybe, I'm also looking at you, Naja, now, that is this something found in other European countries, or how do you see the sort of broad field of election disinformation?
Yes, I definitely. Does this work?
It's
yes,
on.
I definitely think that you can find a similar scenario in many other European countries. What the EU is focusing on with for example, with the East Stratcom Task Force is, of course, their mandate is to detect and analyze pro-Kremlin disinformation. So they do not go into detail about the homegrown disinformation in individual member states.
So let's get into EU parliamentary elections.
Just perhaps comment a bit on the elections side. I think, for example, Finnish authorities did a lot of preventive work, and I think that in a way already helped a lot. So I was a little bit, let's say, frustrated seeing that nothing really happened, boring, because that is exactly what it was meant to be. And we know that we are far from ready if something really would happen, and we have to prepare further. But so that really helped, and also on the European level there has been many seminars that next to preventive action that really happened in all networks, some are far from ready, even during the elections. And then the other one was the kind of narrative building, and that obviously, at least on the European level, was really considered that now we had a story, we had something to mobilize as well. And that's for the state authorities, for the politicians to go for that one, and that really helped. But there was, and then the third point basically there, that actually we don't really know what happened. And that's the biggest thing, because we don't have the access to the social media data yet. And this is something what we work with Ricardo and many of the people tried to fight, that we have to get the access to really keep the big platforms accountable, because I mean now we speculate, we don't really know what happened. Everybody was relieved in Brussels, because of course the speculations was, as you said, like something could happen and really radical shifts, but we kind of more or less survived. But now it's a very much the momentum to kind of prepare for the next phase, and that can be much more serious.
Naja, did you want to comment on that?
No, I just wanted to add to what you just said, that of course it's not enough to focus on elections, because after the elections is before the elections. So disinformation attacks are not only focusing on election times, they are also using the slow effect of constantly inserting conspiracy theories or other destructive narratives into our information ecosystem. So I think this is a very, very important point, that we cannot limit our analysis or our monitoring to pre-election times.
And I just want to add that what we author is just a minor thing. I think the best reason why Finland has been so able to fend off, for example, disinformation campaigns targeted at Finland, so it's our society. People are really literate. Media literacy taught at the school since the 1970s. Finnish media is doing excellent job. People trust on traditional news media. We are the most happiest country in the world, even though we don't believe it by ourselves. But still, our society, there are many things.
The most humble.
Most humble, yes, yeah. But so that we also, what we do is just a minor thing. So I think that real life heroes are the kindergarten teachers and the Finnish media journalists.
Let's get into EU-related disinformation. This is something I'm sure all of you know quite a lot about. I'm going to start with Mikko, because Faktabaari has been working a lot with EU-related disinformation. Can you describe what is it like?
Let me see now. So, kind of little historical overview could be that when we started, we considered that could be the topic, because I mean EU is pretty defenseless. I mean nobody's kind of going for. I mean it's a classical heads of state coming home and what they won in Brussels, and so there was a lot of myths just going and going. And in 2014 it was still more or less like a misinformation partly, and already the kind of tabloid phenomenon that basically led to partly to the Brexit in UK. it has very much now developed into that's a kind of a narrative, and this is probably the link to the Russia as well, because I mean, if there is an existential motivation for somebody to divide and rule, so for example, there is one actor that has it, so it has become much more violent in a way, and especially in the Central Eastern European countries. I think we haven't faced nearly nothing compared to what is it at the Central Eastern European colleagues. I think we have a Ukrainian colleague who might be able to describe how is it really to be in the forefront, but basically the same things are coming to here. We are still a bit protected with the language and yes, the society and basically the government working for a common threat.
I think I would like to add to that not all anti-EU disinformation is labeled EU or anti-EU. I think that the very broad narrative is also anti-democracy messages, and I think it makes perfect sense, because authoritarian state actors, as you just pointed out before, what are they most afraid of? Everything that they are attacking, they are afraid of freedom of speech, and they are basically afraid of democracy. So of course they are attacking that. I think that in that sense our vulnerabilities are also our strengths. And I think that the overall messages are, of course, decaying West, which is a very old narrative. Elites versus the people, which that's always great, isn't it? When you can say it's because they're in power and they don't think about me or us. Threatened values, lost sovereignty, threatened national identity. That works in almost every country. Imminent collapse of the EU and NATO, and then sarcasm and ridiculing, and I think many of these narratives are also echoed in Ukraine, for example. So I think that many of the overall narratives are not focusing specifically on, of course they are tailored to specific audiences, but I think they are very recognizable. Everything that we hear in Ukraine at some point will also hit us. So I think we can learn a lot from Ukraine in that sense.
Imminent collapse of the EU is something that I kept hearing about when I lived in the UK 10 years ago. And so that brings me to the inevitable question of Brexit and disinformation. What can you say about that, Naja?
Well, what can I say about that? I can say that the scale, it's still. I did read the paper this morning, but I don't know if there is any ground-shattering, earth-shattering news about Brexit. I know that 3.5 million British pounds were spent on Cambridge Analytica by the Leave campaign. I think that speaks volumes about the investment that was made into that. And I think what Mikko said about the misinformation, the way it started with seemingly innocent Euro myths that were not disinformation. They were simply misunderstandings, or not simply, they were misunderstandings combined with an urge or a need to make headlines.
Well, some of them were actually created by Boris Johnson when he was working for newspapers.
Exactly.
So, what has the EU done to combat fake news and disinformation? What kind of measures has the EU taken?
Well, the EU has done quite a lot. You have already mentioned some. The EU, the Council asked the External Action Service or the High Representative Vice President to create a task force to look into or to counter the Kremlin's disinformation in 2015, and they were set up in September, I think, 2015. And since then, a lot has happened. Apart from the different hybrid policies, the EU set up a high-level expert group, which I believe you were part of, right? So, and you as well? Okay. And then a lot has happened. In 2018, the Commission published a communication on the European approach to online disinformation. In December, the action plan was published, and the rapid alert system was set up also in March last year, I think, or this year. The EU has also, of course, engaged in financing tools to detect disinformation and images, videos, a long list of different projects. Would you like to add anything, Mikko?
I would say that there was the first phase of all our work was also kind of characterized by the elections once again, but we even tried to, this is not going to end anything. That's when the politicians are interested because it's the elections, but I mean, this has to continue. And so the first phase was really to mobilize all kinds of networks, and I see basically the hybrid center as the kind of the civil service government type level kind of security driven network, but then there was others that take more time to come, and there are more coming. And I would actually encourage all the journalists in the room and everybody to kind of very much follow what is supposed to happen in the, let's say, next 100 days, starting when we have a new commission, because there is if you look at the eyes of what I have been following the disinformation for a while, so EU is trying to get geared for really, let's say, challenging the current problems and also the technology. They are talking about technological sovereignty. That is actually pretty much unknown term in Finnish vocabulary, and there is a really like addressing the tech platforms. We are talking about the competition policy. This is something that doesn't come too much in the Finnish debate, but I would really love to people to follow it. Now we are talking about Macron challenging, let's say, the NATO or something like that. But I mean, we can be in many opinions. Does he do it for himself or something like that? But he's addressing at least the right problems. And if anyone wants to have a very good view of this one, this is about the micro-targeting and privacy, the age of surveillance capitalism, the fight for a human future at the new frontier of power. So this is a Harvard scholar who has really analyzed the thing, and I mean, this is not a nonsense book, not in the way that if you hear, for example, Vestager talking, that is still the most powerful person in the commission, of course, after von Leyen, she's already referring to this type of things. So I would really encourage to see what is coming and to adapt to that one and be sure to follow the EU level, because we do what we can in Finland, but these type of things are to be solved at the EU level minimum. Mostly global, but minimum, and even the US and authors and scholars are coming to EU and Brussels now that please do something about it.
Naja.
Yes, thank you, Mikko. I just, for mentioning Shoshana Zuboff, I just wanted to add actually that we held a panel discussion in the European Parliament a couple of months ago. She participated via Skype, and she actually said that the EU is our only hope, because the US, nobody expects the US to undermine its own tech giants. That's logical. And the code of practice, which I think we have not mentioned yet, is crucial in this context, and that was what Shoshana Zuboff was mentioning. The online platforms have drawn up a self-evaluation report on their behavior ahead of the elections. The results are mixed. Facebook, for example, is right now under fire over its decision to let politicians post any claims that they want in ads without fact checks. Many of these companies are not very good, as you also mentioned, Mikko, at sharing data with not only the public but also with researchers. And the progress varies a lot between the different signatories of the Code of Practice. And the Commission is right now analyzing the results and will publish their assessment early next year and then decide whether or not to regulate. And this is unprecedented because no state actor has ever put this much pressure on the online platforms. I think it speaks also volumes that Facebook, for example, does not have a representative in Finland.
No, they have in Stockholm.
They have one
Nordic,
in Stockholm,
Nordic
yeah.
reps,
As far as I'm concerned, Facebook does not have a representative in Ukraine either. At least they did not have a representative in Ukraine ahead of the elections, the last elections, which...
They have people to sell advertisement here,
Yeah.
but I mean, that's about it. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit the approach to the news ecosystem.
Exactly, and I think this is exactly why the EU can do more than the individual member states. So, and this is exactly why scholars like Shoshana Zuboff expect the EU to take responsibility and be the ethical decision maker that it can be.
Just to clarify, code of practice might be a very abstract for many, but that's a kind of that's a follow-up of the high-level group and then the commission to push the platforms supervised by a journalistic body. You are there, Ricardo, aren't you, your organization, to kind of for self-regulatory approach first. I mean, things go step by step, but now the evaluation, is that enough? Can they handle it by themselves? My personal guess is that not with that one, and I mean that's pretty much the Brussels view, and so now what's the famous smart regulation that even Facebook is already subjecting it to, and what's the responsible action at the moment when we really don't know what is happening in the platform? I mean, I'm not going to praise Twitter, but at least the Twitter put the kind of for election ads, the kind of, we are not going to let that go because we don't know what is happening. So that's a kind of a precautionary principle that we haven't seen from the others. And they go with the same debates. They talk about the freedom of speech, so this is really relevant for Vikes or something like that. You have to kind of link for the next 15 years. And I will give you this one as a present, but this is the kind of digital reality where we have to link.
The code of practice is, it's interesting, the self-evaluation. I looked at it the other day, and for example, Facebook is saying that, oh yes, we look at all the hate speech complaints that we get. We look at almost all of them within 24 hours, like you ask us to. Well, yes, probably they do, but do they actually read them in is there anybody who actually speaks Finnish, who actually looks at the Finnish complaints? For instance, I myself have made a number of those complaints during just the past few days, and yes, I got the response back very quickly, but it was always, this does not violate our terms, and these were pretty clear fake profiles and pretty clear hate speech. So what is, how is the EU going to tackle the fact that they don't actually, they just, it's a bit of a sort of polish on top.
I think there is many ways, but I mean, one is just that these giants own so much data, and that's a big question. The Finnish presidency is, I think the two entry points to this question is to some extent the hybrid center, and the other one is called human-centric data economy, and there is a My Data seminar was here, and I think there is a follow-up in some way, and that to me presents the kind of let's say what the consumers and journalists and all that should follow is that we own our data, or if we own our data, we can be the masters of our future, so to say, but this is the big level, and for that one we are talking about, for example, competition policy. Are they too big at the moment? So this is the type of level of debate. Then there are many other more smart, targeted things that probably Naja wants to describe. But I think the how to make the game changer and how to kind of push the giants, because in the way, at least in the short term, we need them for the efforts as well.
Jussi, you had a
Mikko mentioned about the data they own. I have one question to you. Raise your hand if you have a profile on Twitter, Facebook, Google, Instagram, etc. When you opened your profile, did you read those terms of use? Raise your hand. That's usually so that we are allowing these companies to because that's why we need to inform also the wider public that when they create, for example, the open Facebook profile, so the newsfeed it just appear from nowhere. Instead, there is a logic behind it, and we can talk a lot about hybrid threats, disinformation, etc. But at the end, it's the individual who is sitting in front of his or her computer. If he or she doesn't have any clue how the modern information environment works or social media works, then it's no use. We need to educate the people, also from the youngsters till the elderly.
I would like to Naja, if you have a quick comment to that.
Just a very quick comment to link with freedom of expression, that freedom of expression also includes freedom to form our opinions. I think this is something that is often forgotten, and at the moment the public space where we form our opinions is heavily monetized by these platforms. It's not a neutral space.
I would like to ask at the end of this panel, because I want to have a few minutes for audience questions, but I would like to conclude with kind of like putting this problem to perspective, because I know Naja, for example, does have a bit of data that she can share with us. There's been this debate going on about disinformation and fake news for some years now, and of course it invites quite a lot of criticism and maybe diminishing of the problem in the public debate. And so I would like you to put a bit of context to this, like how big is this problem really? How big is disinformation, use of bots, fake news? What can you tell us about that? Because we do know that it's quite difficult to get the data.
Yes, exactly. As we've just touched upon a couple of times, we are relying on the online platforms to share all this information with us. But a recent report, for example, has shown that just to highlight the number of state actors who engage in foreign influence operations, at the moment there are 7. That we know of. It's China, India, Iran, Pakistan, Russia, Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. Facebook and Twitter have taken action against so-called cyber troops from these countries who are engaged in foreign influence operations. And it's very difficult to say how strong they are in terms of people, in terms of funding. One figure from China says that they have a permanent team which has a size of between 300,000 and 2 million people. They are distributed across local and regional offices. Venezuela, for example, has multiple brigades of about 500 people, and there is evidence that they have had some kind of formal training. We know that Myanmar, there is evidence that their cyber troops have received formal training in Russia. And about 10 times, and here we are only talking about foreign influence operations, but 10 times as many countries are actually involved or engaged in influencing their own audiences by manipulating social media. So that is an increase of 150% from over the last 2 years, from 28 states in 2017 to 48 in 2018 to 70 in 2019. But again, we have to take these figures with a grain of salt, because we have also increased our attention to these phenomena. We have much better detection skills than we used to have. The social media companies are also under pressure to give us more information about this. So it's very, very difficult to quantify and compare with previous figures. But I think it's safe to say that the phenomenon is on the rise.
Thank you for that very clear explanation of the quantity. We have a couple of minutes for audience questions, and after that Caius will talk to us. Who wants to go first? Anyone? If not, then we'll just continue for a couple more minutes. Mikko, you had a comment.
No, I will not even very well describe that what we really don't know, but I mean what is assumed, and so it's all about like getting to know that to the bottom of the things before you know. You don't really know to regulate it efficiently as well. But I would go to the once again to the structure of the things, and the whole news ecosystem is practically working on an ad-based, environment. So I mean that's what is happening. That the reality is distorted by this same thing. I mean, they don't go to your websites directly. They go mostly to the websites through the algorithms. I think this is discussed later as such, but basically that gives the distorted picture, and in worst case it really goes for the kind of famous polarization, and it's not, we cannot blame the platforms of everything, but they basically give more the same, and I mean that's how they kind of polarize the society, and this is something that we have to take into consideration. And as a mental proof, always when we are talking Facebook and Google, or even Twitter, so I always like replace it with a advertisement company, and then I'm thinking that if I would give the rights to an advertisement company, how would I protect myself from the advertisement company, because I still want to, so to say, take back control, to use the famous slogan, and decide what, but it needs a really much effort, and at the moment there is no competition for that one, and that's something where you have to start.
Just a quick last question to all of you. In the field of disinformation, we always have to look at the future so we can prepare. So what, in your view, is going to happen next in the field of disinformation or fake news? Nobody wants to go
the
first.
Oracle, okay. No, but I mean, have a look what the new commission is coming in let's say February and March. And yes, I mean, if you have a strong say as a journalist, empower Ricardo to lobby for that, and I mean, we do our best to kind of keep a strong scrutiny, because I mean, if the Commission is not able to present a credible, let's say, roadmap, and I think it's going under the democracy roadmap, and this tells what's at stake. So if that's not going to be credible, so I think we will have a very hard time in the next 4 or 5 years, because the technology is developing so quickly, and if we are not able to get the grasp of it, so then it's a really complex. And don't try to just like, this country is doing that or Macron is doing that. Are they doing the right thing? And keep in mind privacy and micro-targeting, so we are already in the let's say on the right track.
Jussi.
I think every country should find their own ways to counter this phenomenon. It's not going to disappear anywhere. For us, our Finnishness is an asset. So what we are doing, it suits for us. We can learn from each other, but still, at the end, we need to figure out what's the best way to protect ourselves. And I think that we are talking quite a lot that how much debt we are leaving to our children, state debt we are leaving to our children, and in what shape our environment is tomorrow. But at the same time, we should discuss about what our democracy will look tomorrow, what kind of democracy we are leaving behind, what kind of political debate culture we are leaving, because people are watching what the politicians are talking about and how they are behaving, and the people are learning and adapting. So hopefully, I've been following the political discussion recently, and I haven't been very happy about it. Facts should matter. Yeah.
Yes, I can only agree that facts should matter, and we really have to make sure that everyone is enlightened, and that everyone has the possibility to check facts for themselves. I think it is something that is taken for granted at the moment, that everyone, we talk about media literacy a lot. I think we should also focus on basic literacy, because in the EU 1 in 6 people have reading difficulties, which means that when they read, they're not able to quickly abstract and compare and go to the About section and check with other sources. They cannot do that because they're busy just reading the headline, just making sense of the headline. And that is 1 in 6 Europeans. And this is something that I don't think that we can, I think it's a major risk that people are not aware of because they focus on other risks. So I think we have to look at our own vulnerabilities. The techniques are evolving, actors are learning from each other, new actors. It's also a business, we haven't talked about that either, but disinformation is also big business. It really pays off not only ideologically but also financially. So we can expect more to come on board because this is great for everyone who is not interested in democracy. So we have to look at our own vulnerabilities, and we have to get everyone on board, even the elderly, as you mentioned. I know that actually in Denmark there was a project launched by the, I don't know what it's called in English, the Elderly's lobbyist organization. They had actually created a media literacy project, which I hadn't seen it in other countries, but I think this is definitely something that one could consider replicating, perhaps.
Thank you very much to all our panelists.